Cool Machine is the third and final book of Colson Whitehead's Harlem trilogy. The trilogy centers around Ray Carney, a furniture dealer and occasional crook, from his younger years in the 1950s to where we find him now in Cool Machine. At this point in the series, it's the early 80s, and Carney is a middle-aged dad who on the surface has it all. A wife, 2 kids, a successful business on 125th Street, and a house on Strivers Row. And yet, he can't resist the pull of the street. As Carney dives deeper into his criminal tendencies, Whitehead paints a vivid picture of early 1980s New York. Wall Street is booming, yuppies abound, and Mayor Koch is asking, "How am I doing?" Colson Whitehead joined me around the book's pub day this summer, and he explained Ray Carney's state of mind at the beginning of Cool Machine.
He settled. We first met him in 1959 in Harlem Shuffle. He was his late 20s, opening his furniture store. And now it's 81. He's middle-aged. The store is going fine. His fencing career is, going fine as well. Little secret. His kids are in school, moved away, empty nester. And now the question is, what's next? Who am I now after I've accomplished everything I wanted to set out to do?
So this is set in 1980s New York. You're a born and raised New Yorker. What do you remember about life in New York in the early 80s?
I think going back and thinking about the book, what I've put in the book, it was just a great time to be young. There's a 1983 section that takes place in the Lower East Side in the East Village. And I would go, take the subway down from the Upper West Side and go to Bleecker Bob's, buy records, buy Susie Nabansi T-shirts. And it was a real expedition. I was too young to go to the clubs.
But you had an older sister who was really into it.
Yes. If you're an artist, definitely it helps to have a cool older sister. So I'd walk by her room and she's playing Gang of Four and The Clash. She would take us to repertory movie houses to see like Rebel Without a Cause and stuff like that. And so it was a great time to be to find your cultural self, your cultural awakening.
Who was a person or an instance in that time that really shaped you as a writer?
Oh, I started off reading Stephen King and Arthur C. Clarke and a lot of fantasy fiction. And then I think junior year of high school, I read Crime and Punishment, and that made a big impression. And then definitely 100 Years of Solitude, senior year of high school. And I'd been inspired by fantasy literature, and here was a guy who was a Nobel Prize winner, a highbrow author, who was using the tools of fantasy and magic realism for literary fiction. So that was a big awakening.
There are so many great references in this book to 80s New York. Koch, How Am I Doing? Chuck and Sue Live at 5, the no radio signs on cars. What was your favorite 80s niche reference to work into the book, and why?
Well, I love the no radio signs. It's definitely an artifact of 80s and 90s New York. If you don't know, people would break into your car, and so you'd have portable radios that you would take with you, Benzie boxes. And then people would still break in, think there's a radio. So people would write signs that say, "No radio, don't break in." And different characters have different responses to that. Carney thinks it's a sign of weakness and capitulation to have a no radio sign that's saying basically just attack me. Pepper, his crony, thinks that it's a break of the code. The prey should not talk to the predator. So it's breaking the lines of conduct. So going back to that time, it was just really, really fun.
It's interesting because there are references here that New Yorkers would get. And then there are references that only Black New Yorkers are likely to get. I fell out of my chair when you mentioned John Atchison.
Sure, yes.
Right? If you know, you know. Are those moments meant as extra or Easter eggs for people? Is it okay for people if they don't necessarily get those parts?
Sure. I mean, I was researching John Atchison. Is not really on Google. There's actually a Times article from the 80s about hairdressers. Yeah, I mean... you don't have to get every reference from the context. You understand it, but those markers are realism. These are real people who are living in the city that you recognize. And I want to get it right.
I had to wait for many hours for my mom to get a John Atchison.
my
Let me tell you,
mom was always there. Yes.
At this point, Ray, he's an unk. as the kids would say. He's got some thoughts on graffiti. How do you imagine Ray feels about the state of 1980s New York?
I think he recognizes the need for change and the constant change, but also there's an essential New York character that he's a part of. And so he understands that there's this dynamic process. He's a part of it. But there's an essential New York character that never goes away and can't be defeated.
I'm interested because on the surface, it seems like he has it all. He's got this good family, a home, yet he seems drawn back to criminal life. He curses his father, a criminal, he said, for putting it in his blood. Is Ray a case of environment versus nature?
I think in the first two books, I'm wrestling with that question, and now there's a problem of an integrated self. I think he's reconciled a lot of these different warring parts of himself, and the question is, who will he be for the next couple of decades? And that question keeps coming up in the book, posed by different people. Who are you now? Who do you want to be? Who will you be next? And that question is always hanging there.
Why does Carney always seem to get in trouble when Elizabeth is out of town?
He asked that question himself. No one's watching, and that evil part of him, that criminal part of him, wants to be expressed, and so he does find himself pursued by mobsters, indulging in heists when his wife goes out of town. Personally, I just take a gummy and watch some sci-fi movies, but this is what Carney does.
In your mind, does Elizabeth know about Carney's double life?
She winks. I found a genealogist, did research on my family, and found the first instance of, I think, a Whitehead in a newspaper, and it was Augustus, Georgia, 1906, and the headline, it was "Drunken Negro Shoots Landlord." So I guess my great-great-grandfather didn't want to pay the rent, the guy wasn't killed. And so I told my sister about this, and she was like, oh, well, our grandpa actually ran moonshine for the mob from Canada. And I was like, what? I'm writing a crime novel, I have to use this, blah, blah, blah. So I went to my mother. I was like, did you know this story about Grandpa? And she was like, I know nothing about that, but everyone did a little something those days. I think everyone has their side hustle, their way of getting by into the middle class. And so I think Elizabeth understands that Carney is not always on the up and up, but he's a good man.
We're talking to Colson Whitehead, discussing his new book, Cool Machine. At some point in the book, Carney sees what he deems to be the most beautiful coffee table he's ever seen. There's a recurring quote in the book that reads, "It's harder to find a good coffee table than it is to fall in love." What is it about Carney and coffee tables?
And me, he's not necessarily,
Colson.
It's not really a stand-in for me, but that's definitely part of my personality. For years, I would say it's harder to find a coffee table than it is to fall in love. And then one day my wife said, stop saying that. It's really insulting. And I was like, you have a good point. So I gave it to Ray. But his fascination with furniture is a recurring joke. He'll be in a gunfight or chased by mobsters, and he'll stop to consider the make of the carpet or the make of the sofa. The action slows down, and it's a little moment of humor.
How much research did you have to do into furniture?
You have to immerse yourself. So
really?
I wrote a book about elevator inspectors. So I went to the library and got passing the elevator inspector exam. Took out that book. In this case, I wanted to get the language of 50s furniture catalogs. No matter what interest you have, somebody else has it and it's put on Pinterest. So if you go to Pinterest, you can find complete furniture catalogs, and I'm always stealing slang and nouns and adjectives. So I would just read these catalogs and read about the champagne finish on the couch, and hopefully use that to furnish Carney's conception of what a furniture world is.
We'd love to get you to read a little bit from your book. What are we going to read?
It's the first page, and it's 1981, and we're setting the stage. The city that year was true to its personality, as malformed across the centuries, a monstrous entity powered by innate miseries, operated by brute will, and held together by pluck, fury, and rebar. It had been flat broke, and now clambered from the crater of debt, one mucky handhold at a time. Crime, in its ingenuity, devised new permutations daily, making every citizen a victim or a witness. New arrivals poured in hourly. as if there were room, multiplying the local varieties of sadness and perseverance, and outnumbering those who'd scurried to the suburbs or fled their last humiliation. It was dirty and sick and plain-spoken in its threats. "How am I doin'?" the mayor asked on his rounds, barking like one of the mangy seals installed at the decrepit and neglected Central Park Zoo, a real dump. It was his trademark. Everybody needs a gimmick. "How am I doin'?" The same as everyone else, tired, banged up, but staggering forth somehow.
That was Colson Whitehead reading from his new book, The Cool Machine. Carney, he's a fence. He kind of gets involved with Uncle Rich, a longtime Harlem legend. Rich calls Ray a cool machine. What do you mean by that?
I like those two words. They sound, well, cool. It's a line from a song by The Birthday Party, which is Nick Cave's first band. The song is called Release the Bats. It's very surreal, doesn't make a sense, but he keeps repeating the phrase "cool machine." And different phrases were auditioning for titles for the book, and that stuck with me. Uncle Rich calls Carney a cool machine. He keeps his cool under pressure. He's operating at a very high level of sophistication, so it seemed to fit him and the general tenor of the book.
As part of the heist that they get involved with, it goes everywhere. It's back to a robbery in Los Angeles. I don't want to give away too much. But as a writer, how do you plan out a heist? So because it's quite detailed.
It's very detailed. You don't want to get letters saying, actually, that alarm system was not made until 1965 or 75. So I spent a lot of time getting it right. I think I walked through it logically. How would I do it? Not that I can hoist 50 pounds of equipment and rappel down a building. But you try to make it realistic and fun, and it shows a different side of the characters.
It's interesting because Track 61 plays an important part in this story. It's underneath Grand Central. That's right? Or it goes underneath Waldorf?
It goes from Grand Central to the Waldorf,
Okay.
about 6 blocks, and it was a short 5-block spur line, and basically used for presidents. You could come from D.C. incognito and then go to your suite at the Waldorf. There's an elevator that would take you from underground. And I heard about that on Gothamist or something, some New York website. And I thought that's a good way, a good vehicle for a heist.
It's a good vehicle for a heist. We'll leave it there. Sort of the bigger picture, the sort of deeper picture of this book is Carney asking himself, what do you value? What's really worth stealing? Why are these questions that are gnawing at him or at you at this point?
It's been 1,000 pages. I'm trying to wrap things up and put the first 2 books into clarity. He's been on this criminal journey, a journey of self-discovery. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of question like, who are you? He's been tested in various ways. He's tested other people. The city has tested him. He's survived. But who will he be? Who is he actually deep down? And so that's what I'm trying to get at.
Were those questions you asked yourself during the pandemic?
I felt, I had a purpose. I was writing, and usually I knock off around 2 or 3, but because I couldn't leave the house, I had an extra stint from 4 to 7. So I felt very at peace in my work. I think I was writing about the 1970s during the pandemic, and that was a time of calamity in the city. But at the same time, artists were working. It was the birth of hip hop and punk and disco and New York salsa. So it was great, a lot of creative energy, even though the city was very depressed. So I felt very connected to a living New York spirit, if that makes sense. That sounds odd, but I felt very focused during it.
It's interesting hearing you talk about that. I thought about a time of rebellion, not necessarily rebellion, but this like you would do what you wanted to do at the time.
And find a new language. You're
Yeah.
casting off, what came before, and circumstances have forced you to use your wits and your creativity to forge a new self in a new city.
Now that you're on the other side of this trilogy of Harlem Shuffle, Crook Manifesto, and Cool Machine, were you nostalgic writing these books?
I felt just very connected. I think really coming through the pandemic, I love the city more than I ever have in a really corny way. I think narrating that ebb and flow and that dynamism of the city has really sort of clarified my feelings. I'm definitely ready to say goodbye and do something different. It was 8 years, which is like the longest I've ever worked on something. A lot of words, a lot of words in one book. If you do a trilogy, it's even 3 times as many words, apparently. But I had a vision for who Kearney is and what the city is, and that, guided me.
How did the series challenge you as a writer?
I think you definitely want to, with a trilogy, you want to nail the landing. And there's so many different characters I want to say goodbye to in a proper way, follow through on all the themes that I started in the Harlem Shuffle and continued in Crook Manifesto. And I'm a Gen Xer, obviously, and my trilogy is the Star Wars trilogy, and there's a lot of lessons there in sticking the landing. Star Wars is great, and then Empire is better, and then Return is like sucks because of the Ewoks. You want to go, if you're doing a trilogy, Star Wars, and then Empire Plus. Like, it's Empire, but Chewbacca has a love scene or something. Like, you want to push the envelope and really bring it home. So that's basically what Cool Machine is. It's like Chewbacca has a love scene.
When you say stick the landing, all I can think is Nadia Comaneci. Like yes, yes, Gen X, completely. You dedicate the book to New York effing city. That's what I can say on the radio. What keeps you enamored or interested in this city?
I think if I got it right, I would stop writing about it, but I haven't gotten it right yet. So my first book, The Intuitionist, is kind of allegorical New York.
Yeah.
Zone 1 is a post-apocalyptic zombie New York, and that's kind of like a utopian New York because everyone's dead, so there's no line at Whole Foods or to get a cab. And this is like a realistic depiction. So I keep trying different strategies and attacking the city in different ways, and maybe one day I'll get it right.
With your next book, is it going to be set in New York?
There's a couple of pages, but I don't want to do the whole New York book again, but it does start in New York City.
This was in this New Yorker article, and people have probably asked you about it, but I'm going to go ahead and ask anyway. On a bench at 93rd and Broadway, there's a plaque that reads Colson Whitehead's office.
So Broadway, big boulevard. There's a greenway in the middle, and there are benches. Usually there's some decrepit character urinating or something in the benches. But definitely during the pandemic, I would sit and rest, get out of the house, and sit on the bench near my neighborhood. And I talked about getting a bench that says Colson Whitehead's office. Of course, I'm too lazy, so my wife did it for my birthday. And if you go to 93rd and Broadway, you can inhale the aroma of Colson Whitehead's office.
Get a pink berry right there.
Yes, there's usually a dead pigeon or something there. Yeah.
Is there something in this book that you want people to spend an extra 5 seconds thinking about? A reference, a scene, something that you worked really hard on, or you just are like, you really think nails it?
No, I mean, I think at the end of the Uncle Rich section, the narrator is speculating about New York City mystics and people who are attuned to the city in a special way. They can see the grid behind the grid. And I think all of us have our secret New York that no one else can really see. And I think if I can share my weird New York with you, you can hopefully see yours in it as well. So there are a lot of different moments like that where I'm hoping I'm doing my job.
That was Pulitzer Prize-winning author Colson Whitehead discussing his new novel, Cool Machine. The book is the third and final installment of his Harlem trilogy.